So we've got a couple of clips about the recent indecision regarding the MOU with Iran and America, and particularly talk of the Straits of Hormuz.
There is no, with the case of the Strait of Hormuz, the way they're trying to force this UK, I don't know, this an organization in UK that is giving the path, the routes in the Persian Gulf to be used, and they're giving false information to the tankers, to the ships. That's why that was one of the main
Who's
reasons.
giving? You mean the United States?
No, United Kingdom.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're not even a signatory to the agreement. They're just trying to screw things up.
Yeah.
Hey.
Because maybe these tankers didn't know which route is correct, which one is they can use this.
No, no. They knew that the protocol is file your application with the IRGC and then follow the directions of the IRGC. Instead, they decided we're going to follow the United Kingdom and the West. We're going to tell the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command to go screw off, which they did. And then they've now discovered the consequences for telling them to screw off. And what are those consequences? They got shot at, and then they got turned around.
Yeah. Here is, Larry, what Mike Waltz said, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, about the Strait of Hormuz.
Point on that. That's not just the United States. That's the entire.
Yeah, let me just. It seems
more point on that. That's not just the United States. That's the entire international community. A UN record, 143 nations have agreed with us that this is in violation of international law. Even the Chinese government has said you cannot be taking tolls or fees. Iran was apparently relying on Oman across the waterway to help it set up this new infrastructure. And now Oman just yesterday has rejected the idea of tolls or fees. So they're completely isolated here. President Trump's not going to stand for it. And meanwhile, we continue to move ships out by the dozens every day. And world oil prices are not just stable, they're dropping. So Iran's attempt to hold the world hostage and their economies hostage are completely failing.
Yeah.
That's just a big lie. It's an absolute flat out lie. Dozens of ships. The ships that have moved out of the Persian Gulf have come out under basically ships that are headed to Asia, and they are carrying Iranian oil. That's it. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the real-time marinetraffic.com. Everybody is welcome. Go pull that up, take a look.
Yeah.
The last ship to come out was apparently is either an Iraqi or Iranian ship called the Kemba or called the Neshat. And its destination says it's Kemba. Let me look that up.
Yeah, here is the photo, Larry, that shows the compares, for example, June 26th, 2 days ago, you see the passage of these ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And something like 40, 50 tankers a day, something like that.
Yeah, no,
you see that it's not even comparable to what it was in June,
Yeah, it's not even close.
No.
And so Iran is effectively closed the strait.
Yeah, that's they're trying to say that. I think the whole process of negotiation is part of this sort of scam of manipulating the market. Because where are we with the MOU, Larry? Just to be honest, before MOU being signed and today, what is the difference?
It's been violated. So they're going to continue. They've still got areas to negotiate with. The only thing that we, look at it from Iran's standpoint. What has Iran gotten out of this? One, the U.S. has lifted its blockade. 2, the U.S. Navy is no longer actively trying to stop or shoot at Iranian ships. 3, Iran can sell oil to whoever it wants. 4, Iran's getting money via Saudi Arabia and Qatar, $12 billion that the United States is supposed to pay, and those countries say, "Look, we'll front you the money here, we'll give it to you." So I think Iran's actually in a pretty good position right now. It's the United States that's desperately trying to figure out, what do we do?
And this is it. When you listen to mainstream media, it's just absolute nonsense. Like that guy on Fox News. That was Larry's answer. But Dan Davis had a better answer to the same clip. We'll just jump to that one. So we'll just jump into Dan Davis speaking on the same topic Larry was just speaking on.
He has shown that. That is a fact. That is a true statement. He has shown himself unafraid, which is not to say he has shown himself wise in using that power. As a matter of fact, he has been unwise because the intelligence community, the military community were very clear. And we now have it firsthand, both from Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson on our show, who personally briefed the president that it's not going to work, that it wasn't going to succeed, that the killing the Ayatollah is not going to cause them to fall, that we can't knock out their missile factories, that they would have hold of the Strait of Hormuz, all those things. He knew that up front and yet still took it. So that shows that when he does use military power, he very often does it in an unwise situation. So now then the question is, if he goes back and does it again, what's he going to get? Well, here's a compounding problem. You see on the right side of that screen there, this was something reported by Mario on his X account. Flight tracking reveals a massive surge in U.S. military across the Middle East over those dates, June 18 to 25. The Pentagon spent a week moving the chess pieces into place, flooding the region with heavy cargo, fresh interceptors, and ordnance. That's what's being reported. That's what's being reported open. But when you see all that, and what you see on the screen there, this is actually on the actual posted video, and you see a lot of American military aircraft going back and forth. Well, that's just the airplanes. What apparently some don't realize, and the assumption was, that those were planes moving assets into the region. But I have it on pretty good authority from somebody in the region that that's planes moving things out of the region, that has begun the process of redeploying. So we're moving some of our assets out of the region and redeploying back into the United States, or else into bases from which they came in Europe and elsewhere. That tells you, and look, you can fool anybody on an X account, and the President Trump can say whatever he wants in public. Caroline Leavitt can talk about how strong we are, etc. But the Iranians know. They know that, number one, that when we had everything there, that was an insufficient amount of combat power to bring them to heel. And they are certainly not foolish enough to not understand, because they have assets on the ground, and they almost certainly have help from Iran, from Russia and from China, intelligence sources. So I think they're pretty likely to know that that's going down. Of course, that will add to the leverage of the Iranian side. That will give them more power, because now then they know that this kind of talk by Caroline Leavitt plays well among the Fox people who watch the show, but they know that it's hollow, because insufficient power we had in the first full-on 40 days is now diminishing. But their defensive power hasn't changed. The mountains are still there, and fewer of our missiles are there. So they know all of that. So now then their confidence with doing what they want here, both with holding Israel's feet to the fire in Lebanon and with moving forward in the Strait of Hormuz, and moving forward in trying to talk to our allies and saying, there's a better way, folks. There's a better way to do this that assures your security long term. It'll cost you a fee here. Other places around the world cost fees. That's nothing out of the ordinary, but that's just going to be, we'll just factor that into the price of a barrel of oil, and really it'll be kind of inconsequential. You can see those arguments are being made. The people in the region are listening to it. That's why they're going, that's not as crazy it may sound. Now, if you only listen to Western media, however, you'll get a very, very different view of things. And let's just take a look at a few of them here. This is the American ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz, former national security advisor, who has this to say over the weekend.
I'm sorry for playing the same clip twice, but it's important to hear. You had Larry Johnson, former CIA, his opinion on it, and now Daniel Davis, former Lieutenant Colonel, I think, who's very passionate about this because he doesn't want to see troops dying. He doesn't. He was almost in this administration, but because he has a rational head, he wasn't good enough for them.
A UN record, 143 nations have agreed with us that this is in violation of international law. Even the Chinese government has said you cannot be taking tolls or fees. Iran was apparently relying on Oman across the waterway to help it set up this new infrastructure. And now Oman has rejected the idea of tolls or fees. So they're completely isolated here. President Trump's not going to stand for it. And meanwhile, we continue to move ships out by the dozens every day. And world oil prices are not just stable, they're dropping. So Iran's attempt to hold the world hostage and their economies hostage are completely failing.
Yeah, but did Oman say that? That's what he claimed in there. But you can see this headline from this morning. Oman tells Europe ships may face fees for the Strait of Hormuz after all. Not quite what the ambassador was saying there to the Fox network over the weekend, and therefore to Latin America. And again, he's talking all this brash and bold talk here. And listen, one of the other things he said there was technically correct. It was true. He said the oil price has dropped really rapidly. I think over the weekend it got into the 60s, which is remarkable because that's about where it was. I want to say 62, or it was 60 something the day before the war started, which itself had risen up. It was in the 50s before all this build up to the war started. But the fact that it's in the 60s right now is really strange. And it's on the surface of it, the way the system used to work, that was a bellwether for what the industry thought the situation was. But as we have seen, and we've had many guests on our shows to quantify this, and many oil experts, and I'm talking mainstream oil experts across the realm, have said, listen, there is a long way to get back to normal. Much of the shut-in oil hasn't even restarted yet. Some has. I checked over the weekend, and if 11 million barrels a day in the region had been shut in, so it was whatever, it was like 20 million barrels a day prior to the war, roughly went through the Strait of Hormuz. But then there's other bypass routes. Saudi Arabia has a pipeline that goes across to the Red Sea. There's some stuff that goes across Oman to the Gulf of Oman that bypasses the Strait, etc. So all that together, plus whatever was leaking through, it was about 11 million barrels were not coming out. So shut in, which means that they weren't producing because many of these countries, their storage facilities got full. So they said, okay, look, this is as far as we can go. We're not going to be able to go any further. We have to shut it down. Well, that has restarted. So it got to about 11 point something, and then it got down to 9 point something over the weekend. So they're starting to do that. But they can't do it that fast because until they get a whole flow of regular tankers coming in that are empty, that can continue to get back to that case, but where the pre-war case, you can't turn all that production back on. It's going to take months to get this system unwound. We've been telling you this from the beginning, and now it's starting to play out. So the fact that the oil price is down to in the 60s is a reflection of the belief that investors have in the future price of oil, which is different than the actual price of oil right now. And that can only go so far because when, like I've said, GDP is created by physical oil that you have to have in order to create economic activity. And if there's not enough, then you're not going to be able to produce it, whatever the price may be there. And many people think it's going to be better because they see the strait opened up. But the physical oil is still, last time I checked, it was when it was in the low 70s over the weekend, it was 106 spot price, the actual price that is paid. And the further we go down the road, the more those numbers are going to come into alignment. We'll see how that plays out there too. But that's one thing. So there's Mike Waltz here. But oh boy, there's these other two. Here's a couple from the U.S. government. Senator Marshall is going to go so far as to say we basically won the war, man.
Secretary Rubio testified that the war is over, yet overnight the U.S. launched new strikes inside Iran. If the U.S. is still bombing Iran 120 days into this conflict, how can the Trump administration credibly say the war is over?
I'm just going to stay focused on what my goals have been all along. No nukes for Iran, no forever wars, bring the cost of gas and grocery down. The major war is over, and think of this as just a mop-up operation. We have to press them. If they strike us, we have to strike them back by 10. We're making great progress. To your point about Secretary Rubio, he just made a great landmark case over in Lebanon and Israel, getting those folks together. Let's root for the Trump team for once rather than try to tear him down.
Let's just root for the Trump team. Look, I root for every administration, always have. I don't care if it's Barack Obama, if it was Joe Biden, if it was President Trump the first time, going all the way back, Clinton, Bush, and President Trump now. I am always rooting for the American president because if he succeeds, our country succeeds. And if he fails, we fail. But don't confuse support for the administration to be success with a blanket cover over whatever they say gets cheered, because hell no. When they're taking actions, and I did this with Barack Obama, if you watched our show, you saw that I did it with Joe Biden, and I am definitely going to do the same thing here with President Trump and hold his feet to the fire. When he says stuff that is unhinged, that is untrue, that is harmful to America, we're going to call that out. And when he does things that are good for America, when he makes positive decisions, we allowed him with that. We've done that with all the presidents. We're going to continue to do it. But Senator Marshall here is trying to say, no, we're going to conflate all that. You must cheer President Trump on no matter what. So let's stop working against him. No, there's no working against him. There is calling out bad policy. And when you have this fiction that we have won the war and we're mopping up, what does that even mean? In real terms, mopping up means that you have something largely taken care of and largely successfully accomplished, but there's some messy things here and you got to go clean them up. But the big thing's done. Nothing of the close is. Is the Strait of Hormuz open up on our terms? It is not. It is open up only on the good pleasure and the daily means and the daily desires of Tehran. So that's not a mop up, friend. That is, we lost the war. The best of our military could not compel compliance for the Iranian side, such that we had to go into a ceasefire status and then ask for a memorandum of understanding. If what he said was true militarily, this is just mopping up, there would be no memorandum of understanding. There would only be terms of surrender.
And this is it, like all these former leaders of military, former diplomats, geopoliticians, economic professionals, they all say the same thing. America couldn't beat Iran. They couldn't defeat them with air power alone. They could not do it, and they can't invade. It's too big. They haven't got enough troops. And Dan Davis gets passionate because he's seen it firsthand in Iraq, Desert Storm. He doesn't want repeats of it, and history is repeating itself again and again and again. And it's all for one project, and everyone can see it now. It's pathetic. We need to root this out, like. No more wars, but I just thought it was interesting to share that. So there you go.